AJ. Welcome to the Fantasy Grimoire podcast. It is so great to finally have you on here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
We followed each other, and I mean, you are a relatively, I almost want to say, new discovery to me. I was captivated by your stunning graphics, might I add.
Thank you.
Then my first guest, Nikita Bell, she recommended you to me. She was like, hey, you need to talk to AJ. She's doing great things with her debut. So here we are. Line Between the Stars. I'm obsessed with this concept, especially we've just finished the Zodiac Academy series. So I'm imagining you get a few comparisons there. Do you want to talk us through your inspiration for this series?
Yeah, actually, and just to back up, it is actually a standalone, which a lot of people are really surprised by that. I know, because when you look at the zodiacs, you're like, gosh, there's just so much possibilities to kind of expand that. And I'm not opposed to potentially expanding that in the future, but as of right now, it's always kind of been more intended as a standalone. So, that's kind of where it is right now. In terms of my inspiration, as I'm sure any author can relate, you work on your book exclusively for very long periods of time, and you have to really enjoy and have a strong interest in what it is that you're writing. And when I decided that I wanted to write a book, I kind of sat down and asked myself, like, what would I want to write about and read over and over and over? And I've always loved astrology, and I always thought astrology was really interesting. I always found it comical how some people are like, oh yeah, that's so me, that's so my star sign, or they're like, that's bull crap, not everybody's like that. Like, how can every Aries be like every other Aries? But it's just people have kind of differentiating opinions about it. But I think it's fun, and I really wanted to kind of explore, like, I guess for lack of a better way to say it, the kind of like the light and the dark side of all the zodiacs and how those kind of interplay together. When I started thinking about the zodiacs and realized I wanted to write a story about them, I started to try to think about where they came from and why they existed, because the characters in my book, Lines Between Stars, they are reincarnated mortals that were the zodiac celestial beings in another life. So they have no memory of their past life. So then that started making me ask questions like, where are they from? Why do they exist? How did they come to be on Earth? It's kind of like these people now kind of discovering these identities that they had via another life.
I'm kind of on the fence on the whole zodiac thing. So when we were planning this, you did ask me what mine was, and I'm a Libra. I personally don't agree with the Libra definition for me. But at the same time, there is a little bit of doubt because I'm like, shit, I'm really organized. And I'm just really I'm chaotic organized, but like I have my shit together and I'm really balanced, which we know is a very bad play on Libra. So I'm just like, maybe there is something in it. I also don't necessarily subscribe to the whole, oh, if you're Libra, you can't get along with Scorpio. One of my close Scorpio, sure, we fight like cat and dog, but we've loved each other as friends for like over 20 years.
Totally fair. I don't know. Some of my ones that I don't get along with, I kind of have a little bit of a record of that. And I don't know if it's because I know that in advance, but I think what it comes down to with zodiacs, I think something that's important to remember and something I definitely kept in consideration when I was writing was that I think that there is some truth to astrology. Is it responsible for our whole make and who we are as people individually? Absolutely not. We are informed by outside influence, how we're raised, our point of views, our experiences, they shape us. So we're not just beholden to that. And I think that's what people get, probably more so hung up on. And something I definitely wanted to infuse in my characters. I wanted somebody who picked up this book, who knew nothing about the zodiacs, to be able to understand and follow these people as individual characters and less as archetypes of their zodiac signs.
I love that so much. And I just want to go back to something that you said about this being a standalone. I was chatting to an author friend about reader feedback, a lot of reader feedback that's coming out of book clubs specifically, where everyone has these busy lives and they don't necessarily have time to get invested into a 3 to 7 book series. So they are starting to request more standalones, more duologies, because they still want to read, of course, but read strategically, for lack of a better word. So I I think the standalone approach is smart, and it's something that I'm starting to consider, especially as I do tend to write minimum 3-book series. So I think you should pat yourself on the back for that one.
It's tricky because, it's my first novel. So that had a lot to do with why I decided I wanted to write a standalone. I thought the concept, while trilogies or series beyond trilogies tend to be really popular, I thought, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I don't feel I don't want to get into that. I want to learn how to write the book first. And then I think I also, asked myself, I'm like, do I need to write it into a series? I could. Does it need Could I tell it in a single book? Yeah, I felt like I could. And sometimes I feel like that's where I personally get hung up on other trilogies or series is I'm like, this went on way longer than it should have, like a TV show that started off really good and just went on for too many seasons. And you're like, I don't even know what I'm watching anymore. I like it, but I don't know why. And I just feel like it becomes really unfocused. But then at the same time, I also got feedback from some beta readers that they felt like parts were rushed or the romance moved too fast or but then on the flip side people said they felt like the parts were slow. So there's not a happy in between. Like it really depends on who's reading it is what I've learned. It really depends on the reader.
So I love that you say that because I just recorded a podcast as a guest for someone else recently. And I was talking about how feedback is so subjective, where the example that I gave was one of my reviews will say, phenomenal world building, amazing world building. Literally, next review will be not enough world building. My strategy now is I send my editor in to go look at my reviews because she understands what I've done, from a plot perspective. She understands my vision. So she also understands which of the reviews are maybe applicable to those things. And then she takes that, because we do dev edits, we start with dev edits, and then she'll take that into dev edits. So I won't necessarily know if feedback from her is specific to a review or not, but that can inform her choices. So that's something that I've had to pick up recently because I've literally had someone say, oh, your book is shit. And next one, oh my God, your book is the most amazing thing I've ever read. So
Yeah.
learning to take feedback is something we all have to learn on this journey.
I just kind of laugh at it now. At first it was hard because especially as a debut author out the gate, like you want to make a good impression. You want everybody to like it. And you try to tell yourself, well, not everybody's going to like it, but telling yourself that and actually like psychologically accepting that are very different. And I just kind of like started to realize throughout the process of having so many people read it that it all, like we were saying, comes back to that one person's perspective, and you can't control how everybody is going to absorb it. You can try. I mean, we're supposed to try to guide that, but at the end of the day, you're really kind of at the mercy of that person's perspective. So I try not to let it get to me anymore, but years ago, like when I first started people reading my work, it was a little tough.
This is why it's so important for us to find ideal reader types. So for me, I've learned that if you, not you, like general you, prefer dark fantasy, chances are you're going to like my book. If you're a hardcore romantasy girly, you'll be fine with it. Like you'll be fine with it, but you're not going to necessarily be in love with it. This is why you'll see every few months I try and do a refresher on who my ideal reader type is. If you like this, this, and this, and this, then you'll like my work. One of my friends, I need to give her a commission for how much I reference her. She is a hardcore romantasy girly, and we've had the conversation about if she should read my books or not. And I say to her, honestly, I don't think you should. I don't think it's your thing. And at the end of the day, I'm a reader first, and life's too short to read a shit book.
Yeah.
And I don't think my book is shit, but it's just she's not my ideal reader type.
Yeah. Well, it's just kind of interesting because even when I had like ARC readers, you literally have the description of your book. And my description described a mortal woman discovering that she was this zodiac reincarnation and goes to this other world. Somebody said they couldn't finish the arc because they don't like fantasy that takes place in the real world because it takes them out of it. And I was like, wait, like, so the other thing is readers also, you have to take it with a grain of salt because readers will they will read reviews, they will read the back of the book, and they will get in there and be like, this is not what I signed up for. So it's like,
that's so true. That's so true. I do want to chat a little bit about your characters though. So if anyone goes and pops into your social media page, they will see that you've introduced a lot of characters by their zodiac. Except we have I've just a few that I found. It was Raina is a Cancer, Brax is a Leo, but
Yes.
then you have characters like Levant. I hope I've said that correctly.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, he is the god of darkness. And I'm like, that's a little bit of a deviation. And I know that authors never do anything by mistake. So, do you want to chat to us a little bit about this and what the thinking
Yes, absolutely. So Levant is actually the antagonist of my book. And this kind of goes back to a little bit of what I was saying earlier in terms of my inspiration when I was thinking about like the lore and why and how they exist. And a lot of that came out of that, they didn't just come into existence. There was a way that happened. And not to give too much away with the book and everything, but essentially Levant, he's the god of darkness. And there's also Neoma. She is the goddess of light. So it's kind of that balance of darkness and light. And they essentially created the universe and created the zodiacs out of a need to help them kind of, I guess, spread out that balance within humanity. And it kind of goes into like why there's 12 zodiacs and all the character traits that are kind of split between everybody and what everybody's role is. And so, yeah, I would say Levant and Neoma are the god and goddess. So they're kind of like the top tier of the hierarchy in terms of people in power and kind of oversee the zodiacs. The zodiacs are really more kind of like on Nidus, where they're from, they're viewed as legend and like have like kind of a celebrity status, but really they're more servants to the people because Nidus. I don't want to get too deep in it. I feel like it might get confusing, but essentially Nidus, the island where the zodiacs are from, where everything takes place, is a place of pre-creation. So it's a place where our souls are come into existence and we're prepared for our life on earth.
If anyone was ever unsure about what an author thinks about when they go into world building, like, like, and I have referenced this in the past, but like you don't just write a story. There is so much thing that goes into it, and I can see that you're like, okay, shit. If I give her the proper explanation, I'm going to spoil it for her, and you're just like, how do I pick and choose my words? Because I haven't read A Line Between the Stars yet, but I do want to because it's exactly the kind of book that I would love to read. So thank you for not spoiling it. So I ask every guest this question, and you are not getting away from it. What is your bookish hot take?
Ugh, I know. This one's hard. I have a lot of opinions about a lot of things. I have a lot of controversial opinions about a lot of things. I don't want people to hate me. I think dark romantasy and dark romance gets a really bad rep. I just feel like it's a genre that people hear and it's very polarizing because they just automatically assume it's going to be whatever they think their definition is of it. For example, I feel like people hear it and they're like, "Oh, it's like really spicy. There's so much smut." And it's like, "Well, yeah, the odds that is part of it are probably, very real." I've read quite a bit over the years, and I think there's some done really well. And there's some that's, I think toes the line more towards erotica, which I personally believe that they are different. I think that it's absolutely possible to write a plot and really fulfilling character arcs in a dark romantasy while still having the spice that people like.
So on the dark fantasy, dark romance topic, it's actually something that we speak about in the first episode of season 2, where my guest Shelby, she is also on a mission to break this stigma, and it's a thing of sure, if this category, let's call it the subgenre, makes you uncomfortable, that's fine. You don't have to read it. No one is forcing you to read it, but stop shaming others that want to. The example that we referenced, which I really liked, is H.D. Carlton with her Haunting Adeline duology. Now, whether you love or hate it is irrelevant. Okay, that's not what's up for debate. The fact is, H.D. Carlton has a massive list of content warnings on her book in the opening page, and she refers you to her website, which I think is really responsible considering the nature of what she has written in that book. Now, Is she promoting rape or whatever things I've heard in the past? No, she isn't. It is a book, guys. And if you don't like it, please keep moving.
You know, I, people can see it and interpret it however they want. I mean, that's within their right to do so. And, everybody's going to do that regardless of what the content is. You know, but the way I see it, it's like probably about 100% of dark romance or dark romantasy is adult content. So it's not meant for YA, and we are adults. I have lived enough life to be able to be responsible for my own reading and to recognize that, yeah, this really toxic situation or relationship is like absolutely horrible. Do I aim for it in my day to day? Absolutely not. Would I want to do everything that happens in that book? No. Do I want to read it? Yes. Does it ruin it for me? No. I think, this might be a heavy statement, but I feel like dark romance or dark romantasy is kind of a superior genre in some ways, because I feel like what it does really well, and I'm not saying that fantasy or general fantasy can't do this well, because it absolutely does. But I think something that dark romantasy or dark romance does really well that I think people tend to overlook because they get hung up on the taboo. But I think something that it does really well that other stories try to do and kind of fall short of is dark romance allows characters to be people. It puts a mirror up. It allows them to have dark, ugly thoughts, even though we're rooting for them. And we all have those thoughts, even if we don't externalize them. And I think that's what makes the characters so relatable, is because dark romance doesn't have to tiptoe around, well, I have to consider, I'm writing to a younger audience, I have to be really cognizant of, safety and things like that. And even, I think this is where authors sometimes fall into the trap of making their characters too likable and not flawed enough. And I know that that's always a really hard balance for people to find. I mean, even in dark romance it is, because there's sometimes where you're just like, I don't know, like, yeah, they're pretty bad, but that's pretty bad. So I don't know. I just feel like it does a lot less tiptoeing, and it really allows characters to really be human.
I fucking love that. No, seriously, so much. You actually just reminded me of this one series, again, dark romance, the Mindfuck series by St. Abbey. Now, it took me a while to get my hands on that series. It's like 5 books, but it's a very short series. Now, personally, do I think it could have been developed a little bit more? Yes, I do feel that at times it was slightly rushed, especially considering there is a significant backstory that gets us into the current day books. But if we look at the FMCA, she's literally killing people. She's a serial killer. And that's not a spoiler, that's in the blurb.
Yeah.
Okay? And even though her reasons are very justified for said serial killing, the fact is we know that murdering people is not right. But then we start, as you said, exploring those nuances about why she is on this quest, the things she's had to go through, and it really just makes you think twice about these. I almost want to say these preconceived notions you have. And I think that's a really powerful tool that an author has at their disposal.
Absolutely. I work in creative advertising, and something that's always been kind of drilled into me ever since I was in school, and even, when I've worked places before. And I think it's the same is absolutely 100% true of fiction and writing. It's that your goal with your work, because in advertising, you're trying to sell something to an audience, you're trying to capture their attention and instill a belief in them that this is something that they want to consume. You either want to make people laugh, which I love to do, cry, or think. If you can do all three, I mean, I think that's like the mecca. But I think that with dark romance, again, that is a genre that very much could do all of those things. I think the last one, to make people think, I think if you take nothing else away from a dark romance, if it makes you think about something in a different way that you didn't before, or make you recognize or realize something about yourself, I think that's really powerful. And I think when you start to get into that raw humanity, that's what it allows you to do. For example, I really like apocalyptic storytelling. I think something that's really fascinating about post-apocalyptic content is how normally in a post-apocalyptic world, the villains or the bad guys, so to speak, are the monsters, the zombies, the whatever is coming at you. But really, it's yourself and the people around you when humanity, when the consequences and cultural constructs of morality are stripped away and people are asked to survive. And that's when people, I think, really show who they are, is when those things are stripped away. And that's something that dark romance does without the end of the world happening.
That's so true. But
And
I do.
that to me is psychologically really interesting.
It is. And I would love to turn the conversation a little bit though. I see a lot of discussions from readers about how to approach typos in an already published book. Now that you've published, and I mean, I know how I would answer this, but I'd love to know from you, how would you prefer to handle a situation like this?
This might sound like a really dumb answer, but I would say just fix it and move on, especially if it's something super glaring. I think obviously, depending if you have somebody who is doing formatting for you, you want to be cognizant of their time and things like that. And if it's something very glaring that a lot of people are noticing or contacting you about, yes, obviously you want to update it. I think the real problem, if there are that many glaring typos in something, I think the real problem isn't necessarily in that moment. It's in the work that should have been done in prior to that. I think your first line of defense, obviously, before yourself, is your editor. And that's why it's important to hire a really good editor, somebody with a really keen eye. I think there is a tendency, and this could be a general assumption, I could be dead wrong, but I've always been under the impression that it seems like people tend to want to skimp a little on the editor to save money because it's the most expensive part of the process. But I think it's also one of the most important parts of the process. And if you spend any money on anything, it should probably be that in your cover. So I think that's really important. And then also proofreading, but I will be honest, even after an editor and a proofreader that I felt immensely confident about and still do to this day, there was a few things that slipped through the cracks that my ARC readers caught. And I, requested to my ARC readers, like, hey guys, if you see something, say something. And I was still able to make those corrections, because the thing of it is human error exists, even from the most professional of people. Throughout all the beta readers, an editor, a proofreader, and I had ARC readers that didn't even reach out and say, oh yeah, I found this, this, and this, and this. Like only like one or two did. So I'm like, did they see it and just not say something, or did they just not notice it?
So you've actually just reminded me of a story I saw. There's Facebook groups, like the ARC Facebook group.
I use some of them.
So I some of them too. There was this, let's call her Chicky Boo. Chicky Boo comes into one of the ARC groups and she goes, after a break from my mental health, which is fine, I'm not knocking that part, I've decided that I'm going to carry on writing in my indie journey, and I have a very aggressive publishing schedule, but I can't afford an editor, and I'm looking for people that will edit my book for me for free. And I have like 15 books I'm releasing in the next year. And we were like, are you high?
100%.
And eventually her post, I think she deleted her post because she got a lot of backlash from the group, where it's fine if you can't afford editing. Okay, no one is knocking that, because it is a privilege to be able to pay for editing.
100%.
But expecting everyone to do a paid job for free for you to make your dreams come true, start saving. That's my advice to you.
I think that there are areas where you can definitely minimize costs, and I just don't think an editor is the area you want to do that. I guess that was more so what I was trying to get at, especially as somebody who's never written a book before and only has the one. Certainly my first time. It was really important to me personally to find somebody who had a pretty extensive background in it, who had a lot of years of experience and was really well versed and would be able to call out things that I didn't understand. And I actually learned a lot through the process, through having that too, because they were able to knowledge share with me and kind of explain some things. I probably forget, 50% of that writing again, but you live and you learn.
I tell you that as I have written a few books now, and every time there's a certain point during the phase of writing a book where I go, what am I doing? I fucking hate myself. Like, I'm not getting it. So even though you do learn the lessons, I think because we are not writing like 50 books per year. We're writing only 1 to 3 depending on who you ask. So I think we don't do it enough for it to become second nature yet. So I want to give you a little bit of hope on that one. So AJ, I have to ask you, what is a fantasy book? It can be indie or trad that you believe deserves way more love than it's been getting.
Um, I don't know if it hasn't been getting a lot of love, but I certainly wouldn't mind seeing it get more love. Is Sarah Rickhelm's Control My Night. She released it last year, and I have loved watching her journey. Yes. Oh, you have the special edition. It's so beautiful. Yes. I've just so much I've enjoyed watching all her success and just, all the fun she's having, all the readers she's meeting, and I'm just so proud of her. I was a beta reader for Control My Night, and yes, so it has a special place in my heart. And I actually found her and I discussed, that we found a lot of similarities actually between her main character and my main character, Raina. Yeah. So we actually found that there was actually a lot of comparisons personality wise to them, which was interesting. And yeah, I'm very excited for the next one. And I think this is one of those situations too, where I think it's Control My Night, kind of to relate back to what we were talking about earlier, it stands on its own as a standalone, but it's part of a series that's from the perspective of other characters that you meet. So it's still a part of a series, but it still stands on its own, which I think I've been seeing a lot more of in recent years, and I think is probably why people are starting to gravitate towards that, because we read these books and we're like, I love this side character, I love that side character. I know I'm a sucker for a good side character, and then you're like, they should have their own book, and then wham, bam, they have their own book.
So it's funny that you said that. So two trains of thought. I just finished beta reading for an author friend, and I think at least 20% of my comments, and it's the final book in her series, was I want a novella with this character. I want a novella with this character, like literally throughout the dark. Because I was like, I understand why you can't go into it now because it doesn't fit into the main plot that you have for this book. But I was like, could you give me a novella at some stage? So I totally get that. But also, I'm a huge Sarah fan. It's interesting how we started chatting. We were on the same podcast as guests. I'm talking last year.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, another mafia, urban fantasy. So when I was talking about the urban romantasy earlier, hers was the book I was talking about.
Ah, gotcha.
And she reached out to me, which was the sweetest thing in the world. And, we've just been talking on and off. And I am thrilled to see her success because she is literally one of the nicest people on Bookstagram, and no one deserves it more than she does.
Yes.
So I love that you
100%. Couldn't agree more.
But on that topic though, I know both you and Sarah, you do have the romantasy subgenre going in your stories, but a lot of authors tend to, at least for their debuts, go into the romantasy, the kind of high fantasy, epic subgenre. You chose to go the urban romantasy route though. So was that an intentional decision on your part, or is it just the way the story evolved as you went through your plotting?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think it made sense considering, that the zodiacs are, definitely very much a part of our culture in this world. So I think that connection in general made sense for them. But then also, I have always really gravitated towards urban fantasy because it's kind of a little bit of what I was talking about with urban fantasy. Because it takes place in our world, I feel like I'm more connected to the humanity of what's going on. I personally can see myself more in it because with fantasy, and don't get me wrong, I do love epic, high fantasy stuff. There's plenty out there that I adore. But sometimes I get a little bogged down by magic systems and world building, which you have to do regardless if you have fantasy, because there's some sort of world building element, even if it takes place in our world. because normally it's some sort of like underworld that you don't know about. I sometimes it gets hard for me to sometimes follow these other worlds because I'm trying to learn about the characters at the same time I'm trying to learn about the world, and that's really hard. And it's even something that I struggled with a little bit while writing my own story, which takes place partially in our world and partially in another. So just being really cognizant of how to blend the two together. And I think urban fantasy, I've always been interested in that because even when I was very young, kind of wanted I always kind of pretended and fantasized about being like, this is going to sound so lame, like a superhero. Like I was that person. Like that was kind of where my imagination ran, not so much like I was like a princess or a queen or I slayed dragons or anything like that. That sounds kind of cliche. I definitely was like, I was always really interested in like, what if you found out that you had these powers and that you were from somewhere else? Like that would be so cool. Like stories like that always really interest me, like X-Men and a lot of movies like that, or and just like a lot of the superhero films. I'm a huge Spider-Man fan, and just Marvel in general, so total fangirl on board with all that. So when I was writing this story, I didn't want to write them as superheroes, but the essence of a normal everyday person kind of figuring out who they are and that they had this whole other life that they didn't even know about. It's just always a concept that's really been fascinating to me. And again, I think that urban fantasy has the ability to hold up a mirror to humanity in a way that is almost like a direct reflection, because we recognize everything in our own lives within it already because it's in our world. I think it also just has the ability to cross other genres. Like you have dystopian, you have apocalyptic, you have paranormal, like supernatural, like you can have, and now in urban fantasy, like you can have fairies, and it all overlaps really. The possibilities are really endless.
I do want to talk a little bit about your book comps for the listeners or the readers, whichever version you prefer. When authors market their books, they tend to try and pick 1 to 2 comps, sometimes 3, for their books or series, so that the reader can be like, hey, I like that book, so I'm probably going to like this book, hence the term comps, comparisons. That's what it's short for. So which are your comps for Line Between the Stars?
I actually had a little bit of a tough time with book comps because I drew a lot of my inspiration from TVs and shows that I like. So one tactic that I tried and I felt like worked pretty well for me to kind of hone in on what those book comps could be is I asked my beta readers when I was surveying them, what did this remind you of? Did it make you think of anything? And because a lot of readers, they have their own opinions about stuff. And if you start to get a lot of the same answers or similar answers, that's a really good way, I think, to help find a book comp. Something that I've heard a lot is obviously, I think the lowest hanging fruit is Zodiac Academy. I have not personally read Zodiac Academy. I mean, blasphemy, right? But I have heard enough about it to understand what it's roughly about. And that's the thing with book comps that are really tough too. It's like, well, why are you choosing the book comp that you're choosing? If I were to choose Zodiac Academy as a book comp, it'd be simply because it's about zodiacs. Because to my knowledge, there's absolutely no other similarities. Because I'd say like tonally, I definitely lean towards Mortal Instruments.
Forgot about them for a second.
Yeah.
She said it has one of the series behind her.
Yeah, so I definitely, like, from a tonality standpoint, at least and that's the hard part, right? Because some of my book takes place in our world, but a lot of it doesn't. So that's not necessarily true of the part of the book that's not in our world. So that's why it does get, I think, a little tough with comps. I had an editor ask me about, like, well, what are your comps? And I had said Zodiac Academy because that was something that I had heard from a lot of people. And like I said, it's kind of like a low-hanging fruit because zodiacs, I mean, that's a natural comparison that a lot of people draw. And her response was that she didn't feel that that was an appropriate comp because just based off of the type of relationships that are in it and the fact that they're at a school and things like that, that she didn't particularly feel that that was a comp that made sense. And which really kind of made me start to think, well, that's kind of an interesting perspective. What makes a comp a good comp? Is it based off of character types? Is it based off plot or magic systems or just content? Because, I mean, technically everything that I know of knowing about Zodiac Academy is like content-wise zodiacs.
I haven't gone with book comps for any of my series. I have definitely gone with movies and TV series
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of my series are inspired by those things. The most obvious example is The Rule of the Damned. I keep on comparing The Vampire Diaries and Gossipville because that was where the idea came from.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a look at my reviews, I would say majority of my reviews say it reads like Vampire Diaries and Gossipville, like they can see it playing out in front of them. So after, I think for me, after that whole experience, I was like, well, I'm not going to use books to comp my books anymore. I am going to use TV series. So the next one, Dexter and Criminal Minds.
And I would love to see it not just be beholden to books, because I think the important thing is that inspiration comes from anywhere. And that's
Yeah.
your comparison, is where you drew that inspiration from. And it doesn't necessarily have to be books. So that was, I did for for marketing purposes, I did use lore as a comp, only for the fact, like nothing about the plot was similar or any of the systems or deities or anything like that. But I did use lore for that because lore, obviously, it has a focus on Greek mythology, which again, like, and Greek mythology undertones are certainly in Lines Between Stars. Like, there is a level of Greek mythology under there. But again, as with Zodiac Academy, you're kind of like, it's content. That's content. Does that make it a true comp? But then I also, lore, it has a focus on mythology, but it takes place in our world. So it's urban fantasy with like a modernized take on mythology, which is essentially what I thought Lines Between Stars does with the zodiacs, and taking the mythology that we have behind the zodiacs and who they are and the traits, and modernizes them into our world.
You've kind of been touching on this throughout the episode, but considering you're writing about the zodiacs and there is I almost want to say a pretty significant magic system behind that. Do you start off building your magic systems with these hard and fast rules, or do you just let them evolve organically?
So I wish I had a really smart answer for you. I don't. As most people who've never written a book before, I had no fucking clue what I was doing. So I was making it up as it went. And then when I started to learn more about magic systems and world building and how they interact, because they are very much overlapped. They definitely influence and affect one another. Then I started being able to be like, take a step back, like, okay, well, these are I have to set rules. Okay, I have to set rules. So I think there has to be a certain level of structure and something to it, because you can't just be having everybody going crazy with magic and magic flinging everywhere and not making sense. So it really is something, I would say, for lack of a better, I'm probably explaining it horribly. It really evolved. It evolved over the 6 years I was working on the book, based off of, me learning and things like that. In my mind, this magic system is fairly simple. It's elemental. It's not necessarily something we've never seen before. For me, I think magic is cool. I love magic in fantasy. Obviously, that's a cornerstone of a lot of it. But I also, my story isn't about the magic necessarily. It's about the people. So I think sometimes when magic systems get too complex, that can sometimes take away from what you're really trying to, I guess, hit home. But on the flip side of that, I'm going to contradict myself now, because magic and the magic system and the world that I built is very much kind of determines my FMC's predicament that she finds herself in later in the book. And magic is a key factor of what actually, I don't want to give it away, but it's a key component of that moment.
Something.
That moment.
Something.
Yes.
And we need to read your book to find out
Yes. I feel like I'm like rambling. I'm like, I'm gonna give something.
This is something I have touched on quite a bit recently, is that being able to have these kinds of conversations, it makes it relatable, where I say stupid shit all the time, might I add. So what was my favorite one? Thank God this podcast has never seen the light of day, because I would probably get myself cancelled. It was the second podcast that I'd ever recorded, and I obviously won't mention this person's name. And I'm pretty easygoing, like talking to people. I can talk to most people and I can switch and, that's fine. But this person's energy made me incredibly nervous. And that is not something I say easily. To the point of where I started just like word vomit. I had nightmares about the stuff I said on that podcast because this person did not give me any kind of reassurance from an editing perspective. And eventually I reached out to this person and I was like, listen, can you please take this out? Because I'm actually just not comfortable with it. And remember, there's not much I won't say online because I'm a kind of you see what you get kind of girl. And she was like, yeah, fine, okay. And I realized a few months afterwards when the podcast still hasn't gone live, that if she took that portion out of the podcast, there was no podcast episode because she'd only kept me on for 20 minutes.
Oh, geez.
So I share that where I think authors are people too. And I know that sounds really stupid to say out loud, but it's almost like we get placed on this pedestal where we have these insane expectations placed on us, which 9 times out of 10, we're like, okay, let's give it a shot. Let's see where we end up. But at the end of the day, we don't fucking know what we're doing. We're just trying our best. And when we make a mistake, which happens way more often than we want to admit, we learn from it and we grow. So I think your answer was great.
Lines Between Stars was 100% a learning experience, and which is why it took 6 years to write. About 98% sure that my next one won't take 6 years to write. I certainly hope not.
What is next in your author career? Because I know you've been hinting about a whip that I am personally very excited about.
I'm so excited for it. So I kind of even hinted at this a little bit earlier in the episode about my love for apocalyptic storytelling, which is a great segue into my next series. Not going to be a standalone. At first I thought it was going to be a duology, but then the more I started thinking about it, the more I wondered like, no, I think maybe it might need to be more of a trilogy just because of how much I need to tell. It's going to be a post-apocalyptic, post-rapture world in the United States, and I am going to be having the focus be on my FMC, who is actually the Horseman of Pestilence, but reimagined as a woman. So, this is probably very obvious with my spin on the zodiacs. I think it's fun to take different kinds of mythological archetypes and really kind of give them full lives and personalities and just kind of, I guess some people might call it like a retelling of sorts, but I think that that's really something fascinating that I've always been interested in. And I spent some time thinking about, it's kind of like, where the zodiac, where Lines Between Stars started, thinking about the world, like, and I started thinking about the Horsemen of the Apocalypse and how they get the light shined on them a lot prior to the end of the world. But what happens when the world actually does end? What really horrible thing would come next? Like, that's the thing. Everybody's trying to stop the end of the world. But what if when the world's already ended? Now what?
So AJ, if someone is listening and they're vibing with you and they want to get in touch with you or they want to support you, what is the best way to do that?
I am an open book. I am an extrovert by nature. So if people want to DM me via Instagram, email me, I will respond to any and all messages. I'm very receptive. I do have a newsletter that goes out bi-monthly. It has a little bit more of a personal look at my life in case people are interested about that. When I'm on Instagram, I will share a little bit about my personal life if it makes sense here and there, but I tend to share a little bit more of my newsletter because it's a little bit more longer form. So that's always a good place to kind of get to know me a little bit more on a personal level. And yeah, I mean, truthfully, I reach out. I love meeting new people. I love talking about all sorts of stuff. I actually have my first bookish event this weekend, and I'm mostly looking forward to just talking about books with people. So just meeting people and talking about all the same shit that we like.
AJ, thank you so much for joining today. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on here, and I cannot wait to get stuck into your books and see your career progress.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun.